There's a story about a man who went bankrupt 5 times, who was rejected by over 1,000 investors, who, at 65, was told he was too old to start over. That man was Colonel Harlan Sanders, the founder of KFC. When his business collapsed, when every door closed, he packed his car, filled it with a few bags of flour and spices, and went door to door, trying to sell a recipe nobody wanted. At 1,008 rejections, most people would have quit. He didn't. Because defeat was not a verdict. It was instruction. You felt it too, that moment when something breaks, when all your effort seems meaningless. You lose the job. The dream collapses. The person you loved walks away. You sit there, staring into that silence, and you wonder, why does life hit so hard when I've already given everything? The truth? You're standing at the exact intersection where most people quit. Not because they're weak, but because they misread what defeat really is. David J. Schwartz, in The Magic of Thinking Big, called this moment the turning point of destiny. Because what you interpret as failure is usually the final test before the breakthrough. The world isn't asking if you can win, it's asking if you can keep walking when the scoreboard says you're done. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people never reach victory, not because they lack talent or luck, but because they surrender right before the tide turns. What if I told you that the moment you feel like quitting is the exact moment when victory is closest? Stick around, because the secret isn't blind persistence. It's reframing defeat itself. Defeat feels final because our brains are wired to protect us from pain. The moment we fail, the mind screams, "Stop. Don't go through that again." It's not laziness, it's survival instinct. But that instinct, when left unchecked, grows into something far more dangerous. David J. Schwartz called it defeatitis, the silent disease of the average mind. Defeatitis doesn't destroy your dreams overnight. It does it slowly. It whispers things like, maybe you're just not cut out for this. Maybe this isn't your path. It convinces you that a failed attempt means you are the failure. And once that belief takes root, effort dies. Let's paint two pictures. Imagine a scientist in a lab, experiment number 99 exploding in front of her face. She sighs, writes down her notes, adjusts one variable, and tries again. Now imagine a student who fails one exam. He tosses the book aside, says, "I'm just not smart enough," and gives up. Same failure. Different interpretation. Successful people view defeat like a scientist. They don't see an ending, they see data. Unsuccessful people see defeat like a verdict. To them, it's proof that they were never capable in the first place. Schwartz said something powerful: a setback is only a setup for a comeback, if you treat it that way. But that requires mental surgery, cutting out the infection of defeatitis before it spreads. So let's diagnose it. Do you avoid trying again because you don't want to look foolish? Do you replay your past mistakes more than you plan your next steps? Do you secretly believe that success happens to other people? If you said yes to any of those, you're not broken, you're just reading the wrong meaning into defeat. Because here's the truth, defeat isn't personal. It's directional. It's pointing you somewhere new. You're not failing because you're untalented, you're failing because you're misinterpreting the evidence. In the next section, we'll uncover Principle 1: how successful people perform a postmortem on their own failure and salvage the seed of success hiding in the ashes. Every failure hides a fragment of success, but only for those who look for it. Most people walk away from their defeats as fast as possible, trying to forget the sting. But the high achievers Schwartz studied? They do the opposite. They sit with it. They study it. They ask questions until the truth reveals itself. This is Principle 1: salvage the seed of success. Think of failure as an unpolished diamond, ugly on the outside, valuable inside. If you throw it away too soon, you lose the lesson that could have changed everything. Schwartz called this process the postmortem analysis. Not emotional, not dramatic, clinical, like a scientist studying results. The goal isn't to assign blame. It's to isolate the cause. Here's the process he recommends, simple but transformational. Ask yourself 3 whys. 1. Why did I try that? Was the motivation clear or was it emotional impulse? 2. Why did it fail? Was it timing, execution, planning, or external circumstance? 3. Why won't I fail next time? What's the adjustment that prevents repetition? The power of these questions is that they pull you from reaction into reflection. They move you from the emotional fog of I failed into the clarity of I found what doesn't work. Thomas Edison failed over 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb. Alexander Fleming accidentally discovered penicillin after a failed bacterial culture grew mold. Every one of those failures was a quiet lesson, a hidden seed of success waiting to be salvaged. But here's the secret Schwartz emphasized: it's not about optimism, it's about analysis. Blind positivity after failure doesn't help. What helps is clarity. Knowing why things went wrong gives you leverage to do them right. Because if you walk away from a failure without extracting the lesson, you haven't failed once, you've failed twice. So the next time you face defeat, don't rush to erase it. Sit down. Breathe. Ask your 3 whys. Write them down. It's uncomfortable, yes, but inside that discomfort is the blueprint for your comeback. And that blueprint becomes even stronger when you apply the next principle, a mindset shift that turns brutal honesty into your greatest ally. It's not about tearing yourself apart. It's about bypassing the ego. This is the constructive self-critique. Most people can't look their failures in the eye. They either drown in guilt or hide behind excuses. But David Schwartz reveals something rare: the ability to critique yourself without crushing yourself. This is principle 2, the constructive self-critique. The biggest enemy of learning isn't ignorance. It's ego. Your ego whispers, "It wasn't my fault." It wants to protect your identity, not your growth. But every time you protect your ego, you sacrifice your progress. Schwartz teaches that the winners, the real achievers, practice something radical: brutal honesty mixed with mercy. Here's how it works. Step 1. Take inventory. List exactly what went wrong, not vaguely, but specifically. I didn't plan enough. I reacted emotionally. I ignored feedback. These aren't attacks, they're data points. Step 2. Separate the external from the internal. Ask, what part of this failure was out of my control? Maybe the market shifted. Maybe timing was bad. Recognize it, but don't live there. Then ask, what part of this was me? Your preparation, your follow-through, your execution. That's where power hides, in the internal. Step 3. Commit. Write down one change you'll make immediately. That small, concrete decision turns critique into action. Because true self-analysis without forward motion is just rumination in disguise. You're not supposed to punish yourself. You're supposed to improve yourself. Schwartz calls it the difference between emotional regret and constructive regret. Emotional regret keeps you stuck replaying the past. Constructive regret pushes you toward a better plan. You have to understand something: regret is a luxury you can't afford. Every minute you spend regretting is a minute stolen from building. The most successful people are not immune to mistakes, they've just mastered recovery speed. And that's the real magic here, turning failure into feedback fast. The moment your self-critique is done, you wipe the slate clean. You say, lesson learned, and you move. Because your power lies in the future, not the past. And that brings us to the next principle, the most liberating one of all. It's about taking back control when life feels unfair, when everything seems stacked against you. Principle 3. Stop blaming luck and switch to self-correction. When things fall apart, the easiest thing in the world is to point the finger outward. You blame the market, the timing, the algorithm, the people who didn't believe in you. It feels logical, even justified. But Schwartz warns that this is one of the most dangerous mental traps of all time. He calls it the bad luck syndrome. You've seen it before. Someone launches a business, it fails, and they spend years talking about how the economy was down or people just didn't get it. Meanwhile, another person faces the same disaster and quietly gets to work fixing the flaws, rethinking the approach, rebuilding the plan. One ends the story as a victim. The other becomes a success story people study decades later. Luck isn't the deciding factor, reaction is. The moment you stop blaming luck, you reclaim your creative power. Because blaming luck is really just excusitis in disguise, the disease Schwartz describes throughout the magic of thinking big. It's the habit of surrendering your agency. Here's the truth: successful people experience just as much bad luck as everyone else. But they never let the event define their identity. They immediately switch from why me to what now. Imagine two entrepreneurs who both watch their startup collapse. The first spends months venting about investors and competitors. The second starts emailing customers to ask, "What made you leave? What could have been better?" Within a year, that feedback becomes the blueprint for a comeback product. Same event, different outcome. This is the ultimate test of maturity, not avoiding failure, but responding to it like a strategist instead of a victim. Schwartz puts it beautifully: the difference between success and failure is not what happens to you, but how you interpret what happens to you. So next time life hits hard, pause before you label it bad luck. Ask yourself instead, what pattern does this reveal? What skill does this demand from me? What responsibility have I been avoiding? That shift from blame to self-correction is the moment power transfers back into your hands. And if you need proof that this works, just look at the greats, people who faced defeat after defeat and still built legacies that outlived them. Because what they did wasn't magic. It was pattern mastery. Let's look at one of those stories, a real-life case study of how failure, when reinterpreted the right way, became the foundation for extraordinary success. Walt Disney stood on a cold Kansas City sidewalk, pockets empty, heart heavier than ever. His first studio had gone bankrupt. He'd poured every ounce of creativity, passion, and belief into it only to lose everything. For most people, that would have been the end. He had every reason to quit, to blame bad luck, or the ruthless film distributors who'd underpaid him. But instead, he walked away with something far more valuable than money: clarity. In that crushing defeat, Disney conducted what David Schwartz would call a post-mortem of destiny. He didn't waste time asking why me. He asked, what now? He realized he hadn't truly owned his work. Others controlled the rights to his characters. That failure burned a permanent lesson into his mind: never again would he build something without owning the dream. Out of that wound came the idea of Mickey Mouse. Out of that humiliation came the foundation of a billion-dollar empire. Schwartz's principle shines through here: defeat is never final if you choose to learn faster than you hurt. Disney's failure wasn't the end of a career, it was the refining fire that forged an empire. Think about Abraham Lincoln, defeated in 8 elections, crushed in business, mocked by peers, yet he refused to let any loss define him. Every defeat became a strategy session. He studied what went wrong, adjusted his tone, refined his message, and built the resilience that would one day make him one of the greatest leaders in history. Or Colonel Sanders, rejected over 1,000 times before anyone believed in his chicken recipe. Each no wasn't a stop sign, it was data. He tracked feedback, changed his pitch, refined his method. When people told him he was too old, he smiled and kept going. The result? A global legacy that began at an age when most people surrender. Each of these figures practiced the same 3 principles Schwartz laid out: they salvaged the seed of success by learning from failure, they practiced constructive self-critique without self-destruction, and they stopped blaming luck by turning correction into power. Their triumphs weren't born of talent, they were engineered through emotional discipline. They rewired their minds to see failure as feedback, not finality. That's the secret formula you can apply right now. Because you don't need a global company or a presidential dream to live this way. You just need one thing, a process. And in the next section, we'll break that process down into 5 simple, repeatable actions you can take every time life knocks you down. This is your personal recovery system, the same one great achievers used to turn their defeats into fuel for greatness. Here's your comeback blueprint: 5 small, powerful actions that can turn any setback into momentum within minutes. Think of this as your emergency kit for failure. It's not theory, it's a practical system to pull yourself out of defeat and back into motion. 1. The 5-minute morning rule. When something goes wrong, a deal falls through, a project collapses, someone rejects you, give yourself exactly 5 minutes to feel bad. Cry, curse, feel frustrated. But when that timer ends, so does the pity. Why? Because self-pity, while comforting, is the most seductive trap of all. It makes you feel like you're doing something when you're really doing nothing. Schwartz taught that emotional control doesn't mean suppressing pain, it means containing it. Grieve, then get back up. 2. The failure log. Immediately after those 5 minutes, write down what happened. Not as a story, but as an analysis. Here's what went wrong. Here's what I could do differently next time. The goal isn't to relive the failure, it's to extract the data. Writing transforms emotion into clarity. You'll find that once it's on paper, the failure loses its emotional weight and becomes a solvable problem. 3. The big picture check. Now ask the golden question: will this matter in 5 years? If the answer is no, move on. Most of our mental suffering comes from exaggerating temporary defeats. Schwartz reminded us that big thinkers don't waste big energy on small problems. Train your brain to zoom out. The perspective shift alone will drain 80% of the emotional poison from your setback. 4. The belief statement. Every defeat bruises your confidence. That's normal. So, counterpunch it. Reaffirm your mission out loud if you have to. Say, "This didn't end my dream. It refined it." The act of reasserting belief rewires your subconscious from fear to focus. Because the mind will always follow the last command it receives. Make sure yours is one of strength, not surrender. 5. The quick pivot. Finally, and this is crucial, take one small action immediately. Send the next email. Restart the project. Revise the plan. Forward motion heals faster than any pep talk. The longer you wait, the heavier defeat becomes. These 5 actions create a feedback loop that transforms setbacks into strategy. You mourn, analyze, reframe, reaffirm, and act over and over again. Do this, and defeat never sticks, it becomes momentum. But what happens when the blows don't stop coming? When life feels like it's testing you on repeat? That's when you need more than a recovery plan, you need a philosophy. A mindset built not to avoid pain, but to grow stronger through it. And that's exactly what we'll uncover next: how to sustain the victory mindset, the power of perseverance. Perseverance isn't just about pushing through, it's about learning how to stay in motion when your emotions beg you to stop. Most people think persistence means grinding endlessly, forcing progress through exhaustion. But that's not perseverance. True perseverance is quiet, intelligent endurance. It's not sprinting through life, it's walking with unshakable purpose, even when the path disappears. Schwartz called this the difference between temporary motivation and sustained belief. Temporary motivation relies on emotion, it's the fire that burns hot and dies fast. Sustained belief, however, is built from identity. This is who I am, so this is what I do. When you anchor your actions to identity instead of emotion, quitting stops being an option. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and start saying, "This is just what I do." Think of the mountain climber halfway up the slope. The air is thin, his muscles are burning, and the summit feels impossibly far. The average climber looks up, calculates the pain still ahead, and retreats. The true climber looks down and realizes he's already too far to turn back. He doesn't need a new burst of motivation, he needs to remember how far he's already come. Perseverance is remembering that progress has already rewritten your story, even when the ending isn't in sight. Here's the paradox: the moment you stop chasing results and start focusing on consistency, results start chasing you. You become dangerous in the best way, the kind of person who no longer relies on bursts of inspiration. You're powered by commitment, not emotion. And that makes you unstoppable. But how do you practice perseverance when your energy is gone and your hope is thin? Start with micro commitments. Tell yourself, just 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes of focus, of writing, of studying, of effort. It sounds trivial, but 5 minutes of defiance builds a lifetime of resilience. Every time you push past the urge to stop, you're sending proof to your subconscious that you can do hard things even when you don't feel like it. This is how big victories are built, not through giant leaps, but through tiny refusals to quit. The world rewards the person who stays when everyone else walks away. Not because they're the smartest, but because they simply refuse to surrender. And if you're still doubting whether it's worth it, if you're wondering whether your climb matters, the next truth will shatter your hesitation. The secret to unstoppable growth isn't motivation or even perseverance. It's something far deeper. It's faith in motion, the inner knowing that your effort is never wasted, even when the results are invisible. Faith in motion begins when logic runs out. When you've done everything right, followed every plan, and still nothing moves, that's where most people stop. But that moment, that silent stillness, is the birthplace of transformation. Because faith is not belief without evidence, it's the decision to keep walking until the evidence appears. Every major transformation has a silent season, a time when progress is invisible, and you feel like nothing is happening. But underneath the surface, everything is happening. Seeds don't sprout the moment they're planted. Muscles don't grow the moment you lift. Healing doesn't arrive the moment you decide to change. There's always a gap, the sacred space between intention and manifestation, and faith is what bridges that space. When Brianna Wiest writes that the mountain is you, she's not describing an obstacle, she's revealing a mirror. The climb isn't about conquering something external, it's about becoming someone internal. Every time you face resistance and keep going, you're not just getting stronger, you're becoming the version of yourself who no longer needs to prove anything. The mountain is a mirror that asks, are you willing to meet yourself at a higher level? But here's the truth few people tell you: faith isn't always loud. It doesn't always feel like fire or confidence. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion. Sometimes it feels like doing the right thing in silence, with no applause, no validation, and no proof that it will work. Yet you do it anyway. That's the kind of faith that builds empires quietly, the kind that doesn't need certainty, only direction. Faith in motion is about trusting the process more than the pace. You might not be where you thought you'd be, but you're not where you were. And that difference, that subtle, often invisible difference, means you're evolving. You're climbing. You're becoming. And when the doubt hits, because it will remind yourself, the discomfort you feel right now is not punishment, it's proof of growth. It's the stretching of your old identity making room for the new one. The pain is not in the climb, it's in resisting the climb. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just in the middle, the part of every great story where the hero questions everything, only to rise stronger than ever before. So don't stop here. You've already survived everything meant to break you. The only thing left is to believe that you can build what comes next. If you've made it this far, then you already know defeat was never your enemy. It was your instructor. Every time you stumbled, life wasn't saying you can't. It was whispering, not yet. You've learned how to turn every setback into strategy, every mistake into momentum, and every no into the fuel for your next yes. Now, the next move is yours. Don't let this lesson end when the video does. Go back to that failure you've been avoiding, the one that still stings, and run the post-mortem. Ask your 3 whys. Turn regret into data. Because in that analysis lies the seed of your next victory. If this message woke something up in you, if you felt even one spark of belief that defeat doesn't define you, hit that like button to let the algorithm know we're building a community of thinkers who refuse to quit small. Drop your biggest defeat turned lesson in the comments. Share it, not for sympathy, but as proof that you're rewriting your own story in real time. And if you're ready to go deeper into the mindset that turns ordinary into extraordinary, subscribe for more timeless lessons from the magic of thinking big. Because the truth is simple, you don't rise when life gets easy. You rise when you decide that defeat is just the beginning.